Wildcats, Big 12 champion Will Howard.
So excited to announce Kansas City Sports Network's new soccer channel. They're taking advantage of a look that they utilized earlier in the game to show the jet sweep motion.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise.
You kind of root for guys to have those moments, and that was certainly a big moment.
Welcome into Mizzou, That's Who, your podcast from Missouri Athletics here on KC Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the Border War podcast.
Welcome back. Another episode of Ain't No Season podcast.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome in to this week's edition of Outside the Trenches, presented by our friends at Five Farms Irish Cream Liqueur. Super excited, as always, to be joined by Nick Leckey and Brien Hanley. Nick, how was your week? How are you doing? Catch the people up on what you've been up to.
Oh, nothing. Just been working, just been hanging out with the family, trying to avoid the heat up here in Kansas City. It is miserable hot up here. It is like Houston hot down here. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
It's been that thick heat too, the humid, thick heat. Been pretty tough. Big B, how are things? How are you holding it down in Dallas down there?
It's still hot, so that didn't change. But other than that, it's been okay. My wife decided that we needed a new closet. It's mostly my fault because my clothes were too heavy and it literally ripped the everything off the wall, and it was all my fault. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. And I fought her on doing it too. I was like, nah, we don't need to do it. I'm like, really? My clothes are literally on the floor. I'm like, okay. So it's all good. It's all good.
Sounds like you compromised then.
A little bit. You know, I've been married 20 years, man. It's give and take.
I'm surprised you haven't learned that you're just a mere foot soldier in a household with no sort of voting rights or any generalissimo.
Well, I mean, I have, and that's the whole thing is like we get this closet thing, but I have just a little smidge of room, and then everything else is hers. So it is what it is.
Sounds about right. That all tracks. But we appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. If you're watching live, appreciate you watching live as well, as we go live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. during the season and on Outside the Trenches. If you don't know already, we're going to be kind of looking at a league-wide approach. Obviously, there's Chiefs make a lot of big stories, right? So we're going to still talk about a lot of the Chiefs, but we're going to look a league-wide approach and obviously still stick with blind no. But one of the things, fellas, when we were messaging today about what we were going to talk about, I think one of the biggest stories going on right now is the Chris Jones holdout, the fact that he's not in camp yet. And I think it's interesting looking around the league because it seems like there's a lot more holdouts this year than in years past. I know that there's been a lot with running backs and the valuation there. I understand that situation. But from the Chris Jones perspective, truthfully, I don't know if I see him benefiting a whole lot from this holdout. So, Big B, I want to get your thoughts right off the top. What are your thoughts on the Chris Jones holdout and kind of him going on social media and saying, oh, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be sitting out till week 8. That seems kind of a big paycheck that he's going to be forfeiting there.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I mean, if you tab it up, I don't know the exact days and the exact dollar amount, so don't hold me to it. But I'm guessing he's lost about $1.5 million, somewhere in that range up to this point by holding out. And then if you turn and just use round numbers, if he sits out 8 games, so that's another $8 million, you're going to give up $9.5 million to, number one, not get a new contract because the Chiefs are still not going to give you a new contract. 2, if they decide to franchise you next year, which I'm guessing they won't, but if they do, you're still with the Chiefs. And so you still have to play under the franchise. So you didn't get another contract. You still are with the Chiefs, and you're out $9.5 million that you're never, ever going to make back. I don't care how much money you get. You'll never make that money back. Ask Le'Veon Bell how that works. It just doesn't make – look, it's the way that they bargain, collectively bargain the agreement. So it is what it is. I just don't think it's a smart move. Not at all.
I definitely appreciate anybody who wants to hold out and get more money.
Sure.
But I think, there's an element you could say he's preserving his body or he's trying to use tactics. So it's all fun and games until the work week starts And you're like, all right, is he going to show up or not? And then at that point, I remember Steven Jackson held out in 2008, and he held out all of camp. And we're like, everyone's like, hey, do you care that he's holding out? I was like, no, not one bit. As long as he's here for day one, week one, that's all that matters. So all this right now is posturing. All this is conjecture. And so I think he'll be back week one, and he's just trying to threaten him. And the Chiefs aren't going to budge because they don't want to set that precedent either.
It's a very interesting market that D tackle market is, because Aaron Donald has made, I think you have to make like 31 to top his market, which $31 million a year at age 29 is a lot for a franchise to kind of justify.
Right.
But then the second highest is 24 million. It's 24, right? That's a $7 million gap. Like, you're looking at a huge gap where these positions usually only have $500,000 to $1 million gap between 1 and 2. That's pretty easy to slot in there. It's not. It's a tough conversation for Chris Jones and his camp to have, because they want to probably be closer to that $30 million mark that's been reported several times now. It seems like the Chiefs kind of want him closer to maybe that $26-27 million mark. And there's a gap there. It seems like both sides have kind of drawn a line in the sand. And if we know anything about like what the Chiefs have done recently when it comes to contracts, that's what they've done. They've drawn their line in the sand. They say, this is what we want. This is what we'll give you. If you don't want it, go find something else. They did it with Tyreek Hill. They did it with Orlando Brown. Two examples right there. I'm sure they've done it multiple times in years past too. But Big B, you brought up the franchise tag aspect of it, of which I think is so wildly interesting. Because the Chiefs, realistically, what could happen is the Chiefs could, he reports he plays this year, they tag him, and maybe they trade him next year, right? They can tag and trade. But the franchise tag is a little bit different this year with the new collective bargaining. It's like 120% of the salary is then what the franchise or the salary cap hit is then what the franchise tag becomes. So you're looking at like a $30 million franchise tag off of what Chris Jones is slated to make $28 million this year on his. So that's a pretty hefty price tag. But this is from Joel Corey. I believe he's a CBS cap analyst. He used to be a former agent in the NFL. But he was asked if Chris Jones holdout impacts what his franchise tag number will be next year, and it does. He's going to be fined $1.1 million a game if he misses it, and that decreases from his cap hit. So if he misses 8 games, he's missing out on $8 million, and that's like only $20 million. So the Chiefs could get him for like $24 million ish to put a franchise tag on him, which would be a whole lot less than what he's asking for. So I just don't understand anymore of the posturing, right? Because it seems like the Chiefs have all of the cards in their hand, right? They've got all the aces, and they know they have all the aces, but Chris Jones still is wanting to do his bluff and try to get some more money. But it's a very interesting and a very confusing situation that's been happening since April, seemingly.
Right.
Well, but then also look at too, do the Chiefs feel comfortable with this D line room without Chris Jones?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Right? Do you trust this D line without Chris Jones?
I don't.
If I'm an offense lineman, there's no Chris Jones, I don't fear this defense. We're going to run the ball. We're going to pass the ball. We have no threat in the inside, and that means you're going to be able to help out on the outsides. No, this defense runs off Chris Jones, and Chris Jones knows it. Spagnuolo defenses require quarterback pressure. You don't get quarterback pressure, you're going to get burned all day long. So Chris Jones knows what he's doing, and the Chiefs, I don't think you can bluff this one.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think something will get done, but here's something interesting. I was talking to somebody earlier today about this very thing is, we look at the Aaron Donald number, and owners are starting to get smart. It's like, look, everybody loves Chris Jones. He's done a great job. And I know that you set the market, but those guys are not Aaron Donald. Yeah. And they haven't done the things that Aaron Donald has done in the National Football League. Right. So if he's getting 31 million, if the next guy's getting 24, I get that people want to keep setting the market higher and higher, but they're not him. So if you're not that guy, it's hard for owners to swallow that pill. I think they're getting smarter with this. I think you're starting to see it maybe a little bit with quarterbacks where they're saying, look, I get it. We're not going to give you this type of money because you're basing it off of him, because they'll go into that meeting and just say, you're not him. And I go, and I think that's something that people have to look at is, and I know it's a tough pill to swallow as a player, man. It is for somebody to tell you that you're not as good as somebody else. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's reality. And a lot of times you got to start dealing with reality. And I think owners are like, look, we want to be good for the long term. We can't give you this kind of money and then spread it around to everybody else and still be good. And I also think that they can go to them and say, if Patrick Mahomes can take less, you can take less.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the deal. It's interesting too with his contract. I've seen some comments about this. This is his second contract, or third contract. I mean, so he's not like coming off of a rookie deal. It's not like a rookie holdout contract. This is going into his third contract. And when I talk about the other holdouts, like Nick Bosa is another guy that I've seen people say like, well, they're just waiting for each other to see what they sign, and then they'll report, and then they'll do this, they'll do that. I don't know how much that's actually happening, because they do really play two different positions. If you look at the market value, there's two very different positions when it comes to the pay scale. But Nick Bosa is a little different because he's coming off of a rookie deal. Like, this is his rookie, like off of his rookie contract. He's looking for that second contract. All of the fines that he's accrued can be waived. The ones that Chris Jones has accrued off of this second contract cannot be waived. So he's got to pay this money anyway. That's a part of the new collective bargaining agreement that they did. I don't know who slid that one in there. That was probably an owner's thing that they slid that one in there. They said, "Yeah, we'll give you less padded practices, but you don't get to waive these fines." That's a smooth move on the owner's part.
What's the fine thing? What are you talking about?
So for training camp, he got fined $50,000 a day
when you don't report
for not reporting, and then now every game that he misses is $1.1 million.
Got it. Okay.
So I believe when Le'Veon Bell did it, which was really interesting, back in like 2021, maybe 2022, he made a tweet a couple years ago. Chris Jones did, about the Le'Veon Bell thing, about like if he ever finds himself in the position, he'll do what Le'Veon Bell did. Like, he's said this before, that he'll hold out until week 8. But that fine for Le'Veon Bell was only like $800,000 a game. I say only, but it's gone up since then. We start talking about onlys and only in terms of dollar amount in the NFL.
But it was different though, because Le'Veon Bell was under the franchise tag and he just never signed it.
Yes.
And then he sat out the entire season.
Yes.
And lost out on, I think it was $14.3 million. And I'm like, that literally doesn't make any sense. And yeah, it was a second franchise tag. But first of all, you signed for less money than what the Steelers initially offered him. Then you lose $14.3 million that you can't make back. That's just not smart. That's not smart business-wise, man. It just isn't.
And I understand, like, Nick, your point of, like, this defense, like, needs Chris Jones. Like, I think that's been very evident in the preseason games. Well, now they're just preseason games, right? You can take whatever you want to take away from preseason games. But you look at the pass rush, the ones-on-ones, the limited viewing that you do get of that, especially against the Saints, it was like, ooh, Chris Jones is going to be needed in this defense if they want to be any sort of competitive wise. And Spags defenses always start slow. Like, that's historically a Spags thing, and I think it's historically a defense thing, truthfully, when it comes to the NFL, is like defenses start slower. But yeah, Chris Jones is that cog in the middle, and they really don't have anyone to fill in that place. They're looking at like Daniel Wise, who was an undrafted guy out of Kansas. So like going from Chris Jones to Daniel Wise, no offense to Daniel Wise, he's had a great camp, but going from Daniel Wise to Chris Jones is shell shocking, probably.
Yeah, I would guess so. I mean, that's a huge drop off. Jeez.
Yeah. And you look at, too, the Chiefs didn't pay Tyreek Hill when he's, wide receiver, clear wide receiver 1, and Chris Jones is DT number 2 behind Aaron Donald. And also, why would you want to bust the cap number? Because then you just screw the team, or you screw the rest of the team over. Because you can't pay the guys. And I'm not saying I'm all for players get paid. Absolutely. You have a finite window. Owners will cut your ass as soon as you get old, right? You have to protect yourself. You have to know your value, and you have to do it. But it also comes to a point in time where, like, okay, what's a reasonable number, and what maybe put some more guarantees, or give him that Bob Kraft and pay him through his affiliated companies like they do with Tom Brady. Hit him with that one, right? They're like, hey man, why don't we set up some shell companies in Delaware or Nevada, and we'll pay you through some shell companies or something like that, right? Or get that Bobby Bonilla deal. Woo. Right? Come on, man. Make June 1st Bobby Bonilla Chris Jones Day.
There it is. No, you're going to be seeing the WTA and FC Dallas being being on these paychecks there a little bit with the Hunt family. You're gonna see it here in a bit.
Yeah.
But, no, we got to take a break. I still want to talk about some of these contract holdouts outside of Chris Jones because Big B, you brought up Jonathan Taylor and the situation that's going on there. I think that's incredibly interesting. There's been some Chiefs fans rumbling about them wanting him in Kansas City. I don't think that's a good idea. If you can't pay Chris Jones, you won't be able to pay Jonathan Taylor, especially when you look at him. But we'll be right back. We got to take a break, but we'll be right back after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
Welcome back into Outside the Trenches here on KC Sports Network, presented by our friends at Five Farms Irish Cream Liqueur and our friends at Holiday Distillery as well. Make sure you go check them out in Weston, Missouri if you ever find yourself up there. Great place to go. Great spot to go hang out. But Big B, when we were talking about things we wanted to hit on today's show, you brought up Jonathan Taylor. I think it's a great topic to talk about. Before we move completely on to Jonathan Taylor, I've seen some people in the chat while we're doing this live. You can join us live if you're listening to this on the podcast. Every Wednesday, 9 p.m. If you can't sleep, you're tossing and turning, we'll be here for you. We'll put you right to sleep. We'll be the last thing you listen to. But I've seen some people say, like, oh, the Chiefs should have traded him. The Chiefs should still trade him. Kind of hard to trade him right now. But I just want to say, in May, I was telling trade Chris Jones. I think I was saying it in April to trade Chris Jones because his value's never been higher. I know what he means to the defense. But from a financial perspective, from the team side of it, looking at it, you think, oh, you could probably get a whole lot for him right now. And I got lambasted for that. And now everyone's saying, well, I should have traded Chris Jones back then. Hindsight's 2020. But I just want to point that out, that I got a lot of slack from these YouTube comments about suggesting to trade Chris Jones. And now all of a sudden the tone is, well, we should have traded him back in May, back in April, but back before the draft. No, I didn't get it. But sorry to get us off topic. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, Big B. Just give me your thoughts on that situation first off, because that is just a bizarre situation. Jim Irsay's really Jim Irsay'd that one, and it's just been a very weird situation.
Well, it's just what you said, Jim Irsay. I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you basically come out. Not basically. I mean, he came out and said we don't even want the guy. You know, if the NFL, if it goes on and he's not here, it'll go on without. I'm like, really? Okay, so now you're saying you don't want him. Then you, first off, he says he wants to be traded. He said, nope, we're not doing it. Not doing it. I don't care what he says. 3 weeks later, now here he is on the trade market. He won't show up to camp. He's all pissed off. I mean, it's just a nightmare scenario. But the bottom line is this, is, first of all, they're saying they want a first-round pick for him. That ain't going to happen. Nobody's giving up no first-round pick for a running back.
Right.
That just, I don't care how good he is. That's not going to happen. The NFL has changed. And until somebody wins with a running back that has, number one, a first-round draft pick or has been paid, nobody's doing that anymore. So I don't know what they think, or they want a collection of picks that equal a first-round pick, which nobody's doing that either. So especially in the situation that the Colts are in, I think it's a mess. I think part of it, Taylor, is, look, you just got to deal with it, man. It is what it is. I get that, again, that he's wanting more money and he's wanting to re-up it and do it now. But the Colts said, no, they're not going to do that. Teams are just not doing that anymore, unfortunately. So this is what it is. This is literally what it is. And asking for a trade, I would probably ask for a trade, because here's the thing. If Irsay said in public that he didn't want him, what's he said to him in private?
Right.
That's the thing to think about. What's he said to him in private? So I get it, but it's an absolute mess.
It is. But then also, I think if you're him, if you're Jonathan Taylor, you could look at that offense and say, I'm it. Like, yeah. Who else is on that roster who's going to win you games?
Oh,
I mean, they treated him like a rented car.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's like, you're getting that many touches a game. Yeah, I'd want more money too.
Yeah.
And also, if you're Irsay or if you're the Colts and say, well, no, we're not going to pay you that big money. But on a trade, we want a first-round pick, right? So you're speaking out both sides of your mouth. It makes no sense whatsoever, right? And if I'm Jonathan Taylor, I'm like, okay, great. Like, what? Like, then if you say whatever, then take a 7th round for me and just get me out of here. And you go on with your minor league team that you have that probably couldn't beat Alabama. I'm just kidding. They probably could.
Or just pay him. If you want a first-round pick, just give him the money of what a first-round pick would be. Problem solved. That's it.
Right?
I mean,
That's
I don't know. I haven't seen the reports of like what he's asking for specifically in terms of like money. Was it like 14 maybe?
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to get that.
No.
Nobody's going to do that. But you could get 10 or 11.
It's
maybe
like
9.
I think that like the league had a collective memo and was like, "Hey, let's just not mess with let's just not mess with running backs at all this offseason." Because like Dalvin Cook was unsigned for a long time. Zeke was unsigned for a long time. Two guys that when they were drafted and when they were playing, their peaks were pretty dynamic running backs. Very, very exciting to watch. But now it's coming to the point where it almost seems like running back. I know this trope has kind of been played out on social media, specifically Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter, about running backs not mattering. And I know we've had this conversation before about like the Chiefs have been able to do this with like Damian Williams, Darrell Williams, and guys that they just like find in UDFAs and 7th rounders. Isaiah Pacheco, Deneric Prince is the big one this offseason that they signed undrafted out of Tulsa. And I wonder what it's going to be like for Isaiah Pacheco. And I just start thinking about, a guy who doesn't have that 5th-year option, who's a 7th round rookie, plays hard, plays really well. Is he just going to burn out? Are they just going to run him to the ground and be like, all right, thanks for those 4 years. We're going to go find another guy. And it feels like that's kind of what the league is trending towards of like, all right, cool. Yeah, you can be a good player, but we're just going to replace you in 4 years with a guy who's younger and who can do the same things at a cheaper value. And because it seems like this is the spot, this is the look where teams have looked at it and said, okay, this position is one where we might be able to cut some financial corners at. And they seem pretty confident. And I don't know. I thought it was so strange that like even Zeke and Dalvin Cook were out there for as long as they were. Like the market's just not there for running backs anymore.
I don't know. Zeke's old, Zeke's old, and it's like, I don't think he's that guy anymore. But Jonathan Taylor, this is his 4th year. I mean, I'd say years 4, 5, 6, and 7 are crucial for running backs. And look at the Chiefs. You got Patrick Mahomes. He's helping everything else out. And you got a solid offensive line. So to me, it's like, you can't really, I mean, I guess, you look at the historically running backs, right, where they're good running backs are only good because you have a crappy offense, right? Mm-hmm. Adrian Peterson was it when he was them. Emmitt Smith was an okay, but he had that was different before the salary caps that really count. And Jonathan Taylor, he got hurt last year, right? I believe. Yeah. So, he's got low mileage. You look at his stat numbers, 232 carries his first season, like 330 carries second season. It's a lot of touches.
Tons.
And look, who's your quarterback? Gardner Minshew and Ellinger? I'd hold out too. Like, you're not going to win more. Like, what's the under? 4 wins? Why don't we say Indy's the crappiest team with no shot to make the playoffs? Right? That one went under the radar.
It did. Oh, maybe I said they were going to be bad. I don't think they were going to be the worst, but they're going to be bad.
I remember them getting brought up. It was like one of those, like, who did we miss? It was like, oh, yeah, Indy's going to be bad. Also, the Cardinals are going to be bad. I got to watch them in a preseason game. Oh my goodness.
Horrific.
That team is bad. That team is not good.
That I feel bad about Jonathan Taylor, about that is everybody, I think what the league-wide is kind of going, now they don't want Lamar Jackson's out there, but the league has kind of went to mobile quarterbacks to where if a play breaks down, our quarterback is mobile enough or he can run a quick read option, get 3 or 4 yards and get down, versus handing it to this guy that, 25 to 30 times a game that's going to take a pounding and still get me the same 3 or 4 yards, but is also going to eat up a chunk of my salary cap. I think the league has just said, look, if we can get 3 or 4 yards on a quick read option because we're paying this quarterback $40 million, I think people are deciding, I'll just do that. And and we can pay other people, and I think when you look at it league-wide, if you just think about it for a minute, the league has went to more mobile quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he is a mobile quarterback that if a play breaks down or a bootleg, whatever the case, he can get you 3 or 4 yards. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's smart. Unfortunately for running backs, it's horrible. Yeah.
You got to do the Patriots where they had Hernandez and Gronk, right? They sort of revolutionize that position, that body type. And look at a guy like McKinnon. Right? Wasn't he like the offensive player of the December?
Yeah.
I mean, so running backs are important, but how you utilize running backs is different. I mean, it's different, right? And the Chiefs have shown that. I mean, here's how we're going to do it. Running backs, you get 15 touches a game, but you better be able to go out for routes. And guess what? That's what I want. I don't want a running back chip help. I don't want a running back block and a linebacker. But, every pass play, running back should be running some sort of routes and getting them out there, making them another weapon. And that's how you get your running backs involved.
Yeah.
And shit, I think Jonathan Taylor can be that guy. Like I said, low mileage. I think it's a great pickup for somebody. I'd trade a first rounder for it. You know what you have. It's a proven commodity.
Here's somebody I think, and I was talking to somebody today, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Tampa's not going to be great, but if you think and you look at their team, they got linemen coming back. I know they lost Donovan Smith to the Chiefs, but they got linemen coming back that were hurt last year, that the previous year, the Bucs could run the football.
Right.
So you make a trade for that. You got Baker Mayfield as your quarterback. Well, when is Baker Mayfield ever good? It's when he's got a line that can protect him and when they can run the football. So I'm not saying that Tampa's going to be world beaters, but their defense is always pretty good. You bring a Jonathan Taylor in the mix and team him with those receivers that they got. That's not horrible. It's not horrible.
It could be interesting. Yeah, another team like Miami is another one that could be in a really interesting one. I don't know if the Colts or Jim Irsay wants to trade him within the AFC. I think I've heard the Panthers as well as another team that could be an interesting landing spot for him. Miami makes a lot of sense because they were in Dalvin Cook for a long time before the Jets ended up with him. But Tampa's interesting. Tampa's an interesting one, especially with them naming Baker Mayfield the starter. I thought that was very interesting for them naming him the starter. I think it just tells you Kyle Trask probably isn't that good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I mean, because otherwise, I don't think that Tampa has any aspirations that they're going to win that division.
Right.
But if you start Baker, it's like, okay, we don't think we're going to win this division, but this backup, we cannot put him out here because everybody's going to know that we literally have no shot. We have no shots.
It could be good. And I don't think Irsay cares about playoff contention because I think he knows he's confident they're going to be in there. So you don't care who he trades into.
Yeah.
That's probably fair. I just didn't know if he wanted some owners and some GMs are weird about trading within the same conference. I know when Orlando Brown was traded to the Chiefs, I myself was like, wow, that really doesn't make any sense for the Ravens to do that because the Chiefs are their biggest competition. So why give them a piece of why give them the missing link, right? Why give Thanos the last Infinity Stone, basically,
Right.
Why would you do that? But that's a completely different situation than the Indianapolis Colts giving Jonathan Taylor to the Miami Dolphins. That's a little bit different of a situation. But Nick, before we throw to the next break, you had brought something up that I have kind of noticed. We've seen a couple of retirements in the recent days, it seems like weeks, days, of guys who I think are fairly young, 28 years old. You got Corey Davis, who announced his retirement from the New York Jets today. He was slated to make $10 million, I think, this year. I don't know if he thought that he wasn't going to make team, what was going to happen, but he retires. He announces his retirement. Also, Miles Jack, I think he's with Philly this year, and he announced his retirement. Both guys are 28 years old. Thoughts on those guys' retirement?
Yeah, to me, it gets to a point in the league where you're 6 years deep, you're 28 years old, and the locker room is a bunch of 21, 22-year-olds. So there's a gap, right? There's a big gap. And I know players are coming in a lot more mature, a lot more responsible. But at some point, right, with Miles Jack, you're on a new team. You're just not feeling it. And you start to sort of question, around year 6. I got to year 6, and I was in year 7 before I got cut. And there's a big separation between you and the young guys. And, you start looking at it, you're like, man, is this worth it? And training camp is such a brutal thing. You're checking everything mentally. You're checking everything mentally. And it's like, you lose that desire after a while. You're sick of being a mercenary. You're sick of going from team to team and you want to win and everything like that. But it just gets to a point where you're like, is this really it? You start to have that sort of midlife crisis. And I respected these guys for quitting, for retiring. And I respect the coaches for, that we're past this coal miner mentality, work for the team, whatever. And it's like, nah, the team doesn't give a shit about you, to be honest with it. Like at all. Like they don't care. And I love these guys who are like, you know what? I'm just going to quit. I think Andrew Luck set the precedent, and he's at the top of his game. And he didn't want to be an Indy either, just like Jonathan Taylor. He said, peace out. I'm going to go back to Houston to start my book club. And I love it. I mean, Luke Kuechly did the same thing.
Yeah.
So just one of those things where I love that, take care of your mental health. Take care of your health, man. That's more important than any game, and that you get well paid for.
Yeah, absolutely. Football's hard, man.
Mm-hmm.
Football's hard. I mean, I didn't play professional, but I just remember 2 days in college.
Oh, God.
I mean,
that doesn't count.
Yeah, Bill Snyder. That was different.
Bill Snyder 2 days were nothing. No one's ever experienced. And Wildcat days, right? I think it's past the statute limit.
Literally can't come inside for 6 hours. Unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, football is just hard, and it is hard physically, but it's just like you said, Nick. It's more mental, especially when you start getting up there in age, man. It's just, is this worth it? I mean, do you really want to go through that grind again? Because your body's going to get beat up. And the one thing that I do know, just from the guys that I've talked to that I know that played, if you're not there mentally, you will get hurt. That's the thing. You will get hurt if you're not fully engaged mentally. It just works that way.
Another retirement that was really interesting happened at the beginning of the training camp was John Ross. John Ross had signed a futures deal with the Chiefs. 27 years old. Guy gets out there. He did have I think he tweaked his knee a little bit, but he was still back at practice. And then one day he would just miss practice as an excuse absence. The next day he retires. He announces his retirement. So it's just one of those things where he must have just been like, man, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Yeah. Especially up there in St. Joe, away from the family, away from the kids. I don't know if he's got kids or a significant other. I'm sure he does. But you're just away from everybody. He signed this futures deal in February to join this team. Doesn't really know a whole lot of the guys. He's out there and he's just like, you know what? I'm maybe this just isn't it. And I feel for a guy like John Ross, who had so much potential, the number 9 pick in the draft, the pick that went in 2017, right before Patrick Mahomes. Been a guy who's already out of the league, retirement. But as you mentioned, Nick, it's good. I think it's good for these guys to kind of end things on their terms and to realize hey, I know I don't really got it anymore. I think a lot of the former players that I've talked to kind of sometimes struggled when it was with injuries that pushed them out because they still felt like that maybe they could have had something left because it was out of their control. But you're right. You've seen a little bit more of these guys take control and say hey, I'm going to decide when I leave. And I talked to Tim Grunhard. Actually, we're going to have something coming out on KCSN with him. And that was kind of his thing. A different position. He played center for a long time for the Kansas City Chiefs. But his thing was he wanted to leave the game before people noticed that he should leave the game. And that was kind of the big thing where he said, I don't want people to say hey, maybe you should retire. He wanted to retire before people got to the point of suggesting it to him. And that's what he did. A dude who had 9 knee surgeries and just had a full hip replacement. So, no joke. Brutal. Back in those nasty 2000s. Yeah. Brutal.
Well, and there's something too that I can speak on personally is I never liked playing football. I enjoyed games. I enjoyed beating people up. I enjoyed the physicality. It's super stressful. But to me, I realized that one, I could get my college paid for. In high school, my goal was to go be a ski bum. That was after high school, it was finish high school, go to college somewhere and just go be a ski bum. That's all I wanted to do, right? That was my desire. But I got good at football. I know how to work out. I know how to discipline myself, but I didn't have that desire. And even in the NFL, it was okay, I will go play in the NFL, but it's not I was never those people oh, this is my lifetime goal. I dreamed about this when I was a little boy. No, hell no, I didn't dream. I dreamed about being a ski bum since I was a little kid. But I knew, hey, shit, man, I'm good at what I do. I'm disciplined. I can learn a playbook. And then once you lose that desire, man, it's over, right? If you don't force yourself, if you don't love money, or if you're hey, I want to protect my body at the back end. I knew every year I played in NFL, kickoff return, right, as backup alignment. I'm shaving back end years off my life. I'm saying when I'm 70, if I make it that far, it's going to look crappy. It's going to look real bad, right? You got CTE on the horizon. You got your brain is mush, you got dementia, all this stuff, right? And guys are like, you know what? I'm not going to sacrifice that. And, it's just one of those things. So if you but there's other guys who are like, oh yeah, I want to play football my whole life. And I'm like, wow, good for you. I never wanted that. So that's the thing, right? You lose that desire, lose that passion. It's not fun. And if it's not fun, like Big B said, you're going to get hurt. Yeah. And it stinks, but it's just one of those things. So I get it, right? Mm-hmm. Passion is everything.
Absolutely.
Very interesting to talk about. But listen, everyone's favorite segment is coming up next. We're going to take one more break, then we'll get to Blind Nil coming up here on Outside the Trenches. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
Welcome back into Outside the Trenches here on KC Sports Network, presented by our friends at Five Farms Irish Cream Liqueur and Holiday Distillery. Let's get to Blind Nil. The reason that everyone's tuning into this podcast, I can only assume this is the only reason everyone's tuning into this podcast. But who wants to start us? We haven't rehearsed. Again, if you don't know what Blind Nil is, each one of us brings a question or a topic to the table. We don't know what we're talking about. That first part, we knew what we were talking about. The second part, we don't know what we're going to talk about next. Who wants to start with us?
You can go, Nick.
I'll do it. So I have a fun one since we're getting emotional, and I like to eat my emotions sometimes. And today, took the kids to get some ice cream, and it was my choice. And I know what my choice is when there's dessert. And it being so damn hot here in the Midwest, it's like New Orleans or Houston temperatures right now. It's 100,000 degrees out there, Celsius. Yeah. And what is your favorite place to go for a dessert? Not like dessert at a place, but if it's like you're at your house, you have dinner, and you're like, all right, let's go get a dessert. Where are you guys going to? What's that go-to spot? Maybe it's your birthday. Maybe it's a random Wednesday. Yeah. And you want to get some ice cream or you want to get something sweet.
Mine is easy and it's fairly simple. I am a hot fudge sundae fanatic.
Ooh,
okay.
I just love hot fudge sundaes. I always have, I always will. And so it's easy. We go to Dairy Queen. Now, Dairy Queen has 100,000 things that you can order. I mean, it's just any combination. And as a hot fudge sundae guy, I tend to dabble into that. I can get the Oreos. I can get the brownie in there. I can get the Reese's in there. Yep. Sometimes I get all of that in there, So mine is very, very simple. That's a good question, man. I like that one. But yeah, mine is Dairy Queen. It's not far from the house. And hot fudge sundae. I'm an easy hot fudge sundae person.
I like that.
It's good. This is the right podcast for if you want food takes. This is the right podcast you should be listening to. A couple big guys on here, a few big guys on here. You got the right crowd to talk about that. But very interesting, Nick, because there's one spot that is seasonal that I like to go to.
Okay.
Only open in the summer. It's only open.
I respect that.
They actually just closed it. Because they have like high school kids run it and they just started school back up in Missouri. So like they don't have any workers anymore. It's called Hawaiian Ice up in Kansas City. It's a shaved ice place. And there's something different, like shaved ice, snow cones, not the same thing.
Not the same. Not the same. Not even close. Not even close.
And there's something about a nice shaved ice that I absolutely love. Hawaiian Ice up here in the Burlington Creek up in Kansas City by Parkville. A little shack that they just put in the parking lot of this like strip mall, but it's so perfect. I love it every time. They got different flavor combinations. They always have like a flavor of the week with weird toppings. They'll throw like Sour Patch Kids or Fruity Pebbles on top of it. It's incredible. It's one of the things that I always look forward to every summer is getting those shaved ice, getting the different combinations. Miami Vice is one of my favorite flavor combinations. They have one called a cereal bowl, which is like a cake batter. And I was a little apprehensive when I heard it. I was like, cake batter, but it's more like a vanilla type flavor and like strawberry, and they put like Fruity Pebbles on top of it. It was better than I anticipated it to be. But no, that is my favorite. That's my go-to place. I also just love Andy's. Andy's is frozen custard is always one of those go-to spots. Even in the winter, I'll go to Andy's. They're starting to pop up a lot more on the north side of Kansas City because I think they're a lot further south, and now they're coming up north. But no, between Hawaiian Ice, if it's summertime, between like Memorial Day and Labor Day, that's the spot that you're gonna find me at.
I like that. And I learned in New Orleans the difference between there's some really good shaved ice spots in New Orleans, place where it's, sticky hot from June to October, damn near. So yeah. And then Big B, that soft serve at Dairy Queen is top notch.
Yeah,
top notch. I'll just get a damn plain cone, no dip from Dairy Queen and just be pleased as hell. Just because the texture, like to me, it's the texture, right? It's got to have like the soft texture and it's not a real treat. And to me, like my favorite place, and this is where we went to because it's Father's Choice, and talk about texture, talk about, I wasn't rich. We weren't rich when we grew up, like growing up. But like we'd have the rare occasion where my mom would bring back a Haagen-Dazs, like she'd buy a Haagen-Dazs at the grocery store every now and again. And so we get that treat, it's a one-off treat. And I go to other people's houses and they just had Haagen-Dazs on deck. And I'm like, I know you're wealthy now. Like I know your dad probably works on Wall Street and is right now, he invented IBM. This is the 80s, right? It's the 80s, right? So it's different. Google wasn't a thing. Larry Page, Sergey Brin was still in infancy. And so tonight at the mall, they had it forever at Oak Park Mall. They have a Haagen-Dazs store. It's like a corner booth, a corner spot. And Haagen-Dazs has the best texture, the sweetest flavor, and it's just so damn good. And it's OG corporate from way back when. But Haagen-Dazs, man, that's my go-to. That's my go-to.
Nice.
Good
Very
stuff.
nice.
And any of the ice cream. And I splurged and I went and got the cone with the chocolate dip top and the sprinkles on the cone.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so good.
Sprinkles are so underrated.
Super underrated. Super underrated. Especially on the cone. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Big B, do you have a football one or do you have a not serious one?
No, mine's a football one. It is a football. Is that a bad?
No. I was trying to figure out which way we wanted to go because mine is like somewhat football related. Big B, go ahead and go with yours, and then we'll round out with mine.
Guys, so obviously I'm a Steelers fan.
Yep.
But I know some Chiefs stuff. So I wanted to talk to people a little bit about the Chiefs and come up with who is the most underrated Chiefs player that maybe not of all time necessarily, but who do you think is the most underrated Kansas City Chiefs player? For me, it was fairly simple. Well, I shouldn't say simple, but I went with Art Still.
Who the hell is that? I know he's on the Ring of Honor. Is he in Ring of Honor?
He's in the Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
How is he underrated if he's on the Ring of Honor?
I mean, 48 and a half sacks over all those years. I mean, that's not that many sacks. I mean, he played defensive end, 4-time All-Pro. When you think of Chiefs, Art Still is not the name that you're coming up with.
Right.
When you think of the Kansas City Chiefs, that is not somebody that somebody's just spouting off at the top of their list of somebody else's list. He is not the guy, but a good player. Good player. That's what I said. Good player, just underrated.
I didn't know who the hell he was.
There you go. See,
but I know the name because the Chiefs only have 100 people in the Ring of Honor, and they're doing it on every level.
They only do one for one from every year, era or something like that. They're very selective.
They seem like they did 100 of them at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like they had everybody that played on the first teams that moved to Kansas City. They have everybody on there.
Right.
And then they backed it off, right?
Yeah.
They totally backed it off.
They said, wait, we're gonna have to make a bigger stadium if we're gonna do this.
But you can do it on the roof when you put the retractable roof
That's
on
true,
Arrowhead.
yeah.
You can just do more rows on the roof, right? Get it up there, like having a mirror above your bed. It's a really good concept. To me, I think there's a number of people you could go for, but I think underrated to me, and he's one of my favorite players of all time. Sort of try to model my game after him. I see him around the Kansas City area, but I would definitely say that given all undersized offensive linemen, that sort of is Casey Wigman. I think Casey played on a brilliant offensive line. He had some All-Pro Hall of Famers next to him, and he held it down. And he had a 14-year career. Finally got a Pro Bowl when he was in Denver, which is where the little O-linemen want to go. That's where I always wanted to go because they ran a zone scheme. You could be smart, then you could be tough, and then you could play for Denver. One of my favorite sins was Tom Nalen, and he took over for Tom Nalen, and Casey got a Pro Bowl in Denver. But yeah, I'd say Casey Wigman is probably underrated Chiefs guy because Grundy gets all the love, right?
Absolutely.
And then Casey, and you're like, I forgot Casey Wickman played in all those years. The guy played like 14 years.
And he was good.
Yeah.
He was good.
Really good. He was really good. And he had some really cool moves for like a little dude. He had these jump set, the jump hooks. It was cool. Like the stuff he did on film, like I'm gonna try that. And it was fun to watch and really just consistent.
Yeah.
Mine might be recency bias. Because I'm not very old. I'm 25, so I haven't seen a whole lot of Chiefs football in my life.
I thought you were 21 last year.
No. We were 21. I was 21 when I think I first met you.
Okay,
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. I think it's Alex Smith, and you're not gonna find him on the Ring of Honor. He didn't do anything too wild in terms of accomplishments with his terms of the Chiefs. He won. He basically turned that. When Andy Reid came into Kansas City. It was a 2-14 season the year before. Alex Smith, Andy Reid both come in. They're a playoff team, perennial playoff team after that. They're a team that becomes a contender. And he did a whole lot for Patrick Mahomes, who is the greatest player in Chiefs franchise history already. And he's only played 5 seasons. Maybe that might be hyperbole. There we go. I got that word out. That could be hyperbole, but I mean, the 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 MVPs. Not been anybody do that for the Chiefs yet. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Patrick Mahomes has been the best player in franchise history. And what Alex Smith did for that, I think is always going to be underrated. People were ready to cast Alex Smith out as soon as they drafted Patrick Mahomes. That one season that he did a lot for Patrick Mahomes. We saw in the quarterback documentary meant a lot for Patrick, and it meant a lot for Alex too, as they seem to both stay in touch still. But I think that Alex Smith, he was what he was. He wasn't anything special. You knew what you're going to get from Alex Smith. Wildly consistent. He wasn't going to lose you any games, but in the same breath, you could say he wasn't really going to win you many games, even though he did. Remember that scramble he had at the overtime against the Chargers, I think week 1, like in 2018.
Great picture.
Oh, one of the greatest sports pictures. One of the greatest Chiefs pictures, I should say. I don't want to cast too wide of a net there. One of the greatest Chiefs pictures, because there's just pretty good sports pictures. But I think Alex Smith is that guy who's going to be the most underrated Chief. When it's all said and done, I think people are gonna kind of forget about what Alex Smith did to this organization.
That is very true.
Yeah, he was good. He was very good. I mean, they won. He won a lot of football games in Kansas City, man.
He did. Former number 1 overall pick. People forget about that.
Utah State, Urban Meyer. He was 05 picks. I remember he was the year after me. And I remember he was in San Francisco. We were I was in Arizona. So I watched, Alex Smith get beat the hell up by there were some very crappy 49ers offensive lines, like from 05 until they started doing their thing,
Yep.
I think it's like 6 years, man. You had Frank Gore was your running back and a variety of wide receivers and bad teams and old Candlestick Park, which was a terrible stadium. It was, the whole Bay Area stadium scene back then was, the O.co stadium and Candlestick, and it was just terrible. And you're right. There's no Mahomes without Alex Smith. No other quarterback. I mean, imagine Aaron Rodgers. They draft Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers is gonna, mind screw him 100%.
Yeah.
Right. Alex Smith is like, no, man, I'll teach you. Like, I'll know my role and I'll teach you. And he got benched for Colin Kaepernick for concussion. And they rolled with Kaepernick, man. And obviously they should have. I thought Kaepernick had a higher ceiling than Alex Smith. And, but it's one of those things where, there's an unspoken rule where you don't lose your spot to injury. And they did with Kaepernick because, Kaepernick was a better player. But over long term, I agree. And Alex Smith took a lot of pain, a lot of torment, and he never said one word. He never, he's the consummate team player. He might be the most underrated player of all time, I think. We see number 1, right, underrated of all time.
Yeah. I mean, he won football games. I remember when all that happened in San Francisco. But the thing about it was, I also remember at the beginning of the season, Harbaugh basically wanted to give Kaepernick the job, and he didn't win the job. And then once he got an opportunity to put him in, then it was, okay, I'm just going to put him in. I'm going to roll with him. Because the 49ers weren't losing under Alex Smith. They were winning. He just happened to get hurt. And then Kaepernick took off, but I don't know. I always liked Alex Smith. I thought that was one of the worst leg breaks that I've ever seen. I mean, what happened to him? I saw that documentary. It was disgusting. It was horrible. I felt so bad for him, but Alex Smith is a good guy, and he was a really, really good football player.
Yeah, he was.
And he's
Great guy. We talked about guys calling it quits on their own terms. That's what Alex Smith was. He came back from that leg injury, played a couple games,
huge.
but like,
but that's Washington. They should have never let him step on a football field. They should have never let that man step on a football field.
Absolutely.
The way that his leg looked. I mean, come on. At some point, don't you have to have some sort of compassion, some sort of heart?
A shred of decency.
I get that he fought back. Yeah, I get that he fought back. And I applauded him. But they should have his leg looked like the size of two calves out there playing. Yeah. No mobility. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Don't let him play.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up with my blind nil. And it kind of this kind of plays into what we were just talking about. I just looked down and I realized what my blind nil was. And it kind of plays into it.
Why? Because you just thought of it.
No, it's on my paper right here, Nick. Already, it's already on the paper.
I've done that. I've come up with a blind nil like the second before. So yeah.
Sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's a game time decision. Sometimes you have to. But no, this is mine. I've seen this question circulating Twitter a few times, regardless of sport. And this question always seems to come up. But if you could eliminate injuries from any player's career, who would it be?
Jackson.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you beat me to it, Nick. Bo Jackson.
Right? Yeah, you can't.
Jiminy Christmas.
It's unreal. It's unreal. It's like
Ryan Shazier.
Yeah.
I mean, he got paralyzed on the field.
Mm-hmm.
That was But the Bo Jackson effect was definitely the one where you're like, what could have been, right? I mean, I guess it's different. But what about Ricky Williams? Right? I know he was more like mentally injured. And then he got suspended for marijuana.
Yeah, they kept popping him for
right.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So, and the man had a social anxiety.
He sure did.
So he had issues, and they didn't address them. And talk about the absolute wrong coach to have any sort of social anxiety for was Mike Ditka, who I've talked to so many people who were with Ditka, and they're like, no, he's such a blowhard. He's such a blowhard. Like, if no respect from his players, and took one of the greatest defenses and barely won, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Sorry, what just made me think about that when you're talking about that 85 Bears team. The Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer in their career, in their history. Never had.
I'll believe it.
No, never had a 4,000-yard passer.
I'll let him off the hook. Other than Aaron Rodgers has done it, and he plays in Green Bay. It's tough to throw the football in November and December in Chicago. Mm-hmm. It is tough to be able to do that. Cold, windy.
It's a high turf. It's a high grass.
Yes, it is. It's tough.
You move slower in Soldier Field,
you do.
The grass is thicker there. I don't know if it's still grass anymore, but it's definitely noticeable where you're wearing studs in Soldier Field, and you're not agile. So not a lot of sacks happening in Soldier Field, which is good. It's like a snow game.
Yeah.
Easy to defend.
I didn't realize that though, but I can believe it.
It's like Notre Dame back in the day. I think was what I was told. Where they also had that grass.
High grass there. I remember going there in high school, and that field. I mean, first of all, we were all in awe. But you walked on the field, I'm like, oh my God, it's like somebody's yard out here.
It hasn't been cut in a week and a half. Yeah, exactly. I think it's thick. But would there be anybody else who hurt in all sports? Can you think of anybody who I know we're missing? There's someone else too.
So a couple of comments that have popped up here. Justin Houston, from a Chiefs perspective, I think that's an interesting one. Jamal Charles as well, especially from a Chiefs perspective. Remember when he tore his ACL 1 year, came back and then tore his other ACL. That was very unfortunate.
I don't know if they have the impact though.
For sure.
Because they were able to come back and play. I'm thinking more, and maybe that's a good way to look at it. I was thinking more of they were never the same. Jamal Charles was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, he's in the ballot for Hall of Fame right now. He's nominated right now. So, yeah.
I mean, honestly, here's one that no one really talks about, but got his due. Derek Thomas doesn't die in a car accident.
Yeah. That's true.
I mean, he's a Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer, everything like that. But what if he wasn't? I mean, because what year was he when he did that?
Oh, he was.
He had been
Year
in the
two,
league
maybe?
a minute. No, he'd been in the league for a little bit. Because remember, he never played again, and he had all those stats. So
That's true.
It was, what was it, 19? I want to say it was 98 or 99 is when that happened.
99, yeah.
Yeah.
As his last year was in 99, so it probably happened in 90 or 2000. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was that January.
Okay, so
I remember because I was with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. We were in Kansas City, and I remember when that wreck. I mean, it was all over the news, the news that he had gotten a wreck on the way to the airport, and because he was going to see the Rams championship game. The NFC championship game. He was going to go fly to St. Louis. I remember when all of that happened. But you're right. First of all, how many more
11.
years does he play?
He was in his 11th season.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
he still played a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, he played for a little bit while. He was really, man, that was crazy when that happened. But you talk about somebody that was really good. I mean, you get in a third down situation. I mean, you just couldn't block the guy. Couldn't block him.
So that would be one where he's in his 11th year. So then he plays. I mean, DNs back then. I mean, you're playing 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Playing. So imagine him with 4 more years.
Yeah.
Neil Smith.
And then imagine how the Chiefs would have been. I mean, that's 99 season. And then he died in February of 2000. So you look then, I mean, then you have Derek Thomas and, Neil, what's the name? Neil Smith, right? Maybe. And like for 2000, for 01, for 02, coupled with those Chief offensive linemen, those Chiefs offenses, that's maybe Super Bowl. Like, look at impact on a team that he would have had for those early 2000 Chiefs teams.
Well, you think about it, because the Chiefs had literally no defense
Yeah.
at all. I mean, they had no resistance whatsoever on those teams. And to have a Derek Thomas out there could have changed everything.
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame.
Even though he would have been older. But you know what? You still have to account for him.
Still
got to account for him.
Still fear.
Absolutely.
Even him diminished is probably still better than most out there in those years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if he was just a third down guy, still got to block him.
Right. A couple more comments that I'm seeing rolling in here. Andrew Luck, it's one of them. I think that could be an interesting one.
Yeah, that's right. He'd still be playing for sure.
Yeah, Eric Berry.
Had cancer. Well, I think the Andrew Luck thing. I was curious. I was like, why did he retire? And then someone on Twitter, which I love Twitter sometimes, and someone put together, it was a clip of every time Andrew Luck got sacked, and he had something like 200 sacks in 8 years, and it hurt my back watching it. I only got through half of it, and there were some where he's like here and just blindsided, and it just like his posture went backwards. He like, did you know where people fall on those funny videos when they do the scorpion? Where they fall forward and their legs touch the back of their head. There were some there where I'm like, oh my God, he just almost did a scorpion by getting blasted so hard. So yeah,
I mean, again, part of the Colts organization. I know we're bagging on the Colts, but they deserve it. But I mean, how do you draft this generational quarterback and then literally don't put a decent line around him? How is that even? I mean, because they did it with Peyton Manning. He had a good line. So, I mean, you draft this guy to replace Peyton Manning. Shouldn't you go out of your way to, but nope, that's not what they want to do. We'll draft him. He'll be able to deal with it all. And we'll just pay other guys at other positions. We won't do anything with the line. And look what happened. Got the guy destroyed.
Yeah.
And he quit.
Or he had to quit.
They broke him.
They literally
they broke him.
They 100% broke Andrew Luck. And I don't blame him.
No, I don't blame him one bit.
Oh, yeah. There's a podcast out there The Athletic did about just like an oral history of like Andrew Luck's time. And I can't remember what it's called or where it's even at, but The Athletic did it. I know that for sure. I think Stephen Holder, who's the writer for The Athletic for the Colts, did it. It's a very good podcast about Andrew Luck and kind of about him. He didn't talk to Andrew Luck, because Andrew Luck didn't want to. Andrew Luck doesn't like to talk about his football days anymore. Like
He's
doesn't
private.
like, he wants to be private,
I
which
love
like
it.
I respect it. He actually talked to Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck would like gladly talk to him, but he said like, hey, don't use any of this. You can just use it for like as like filler stuff for the story. But which
About you.
yes, so like I really do appreciate that about Andrew Luck. But fellas, great episode today.
Wait, hold on. You were missing that the best part was taken from me of Andrew Luck's career was Andrew Luck, Civil War general, with the letters to home after the games. That was the absolute best. Like I missed those a lot. That was his beard was so raggedy, right? It was like Civil War beard stuff, like Ulysses S. Grant. So yeah, I missed that. That's
They've tried to do it with other quarterbacks too. I think there's a General Mahomes one. It just doesn't hit the same.
No.
That's how. And then Andrew Luck had that deep, what's it called? Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lamb voice.
He did.
You know, so, hey, put the lotion in the basket. You know, I went out there, passed the ball 30 times today. Let me give a shout out to my players and everyone like that.
He did.
He's good. He probably should have won the Heisman too. His year. I mean, RG3 had a hell of a year, but
not versus K-State.
No, he didn't.
Yo, let's go. Good note to end on that, I guess. All right, that's gonna do it for today's episode. This week's episode. Appreciate you guys listening all the way to the end of the podcast. For Nick Leckey, for Brien Hanley, I'm Tucker Franklin. We will catch you next week. Join us live Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. if you're feeling up to it, or you can always listen to the podcast afterwards. So until next time, we'll talk to you later.
It's a guarantee you come to Manhattan as a Heisman contender, and you're going to win the Heisman, but you're going to lose the game.